The security camera footage shows Marcus Caldwell walking into DataSync Solutions at 11:47 p.m. on Sunday night. By 11:52 p.m., he's walking out with a USB drive containing the company's entire client database and 3 years' worth of proprietary algorithms. 48 hours earlier, he was their star employee. Now he was about to become their biggest nightmare. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Marcus had always been the type of person who arrived first and left last. At DataSync Solutions, a mid-sized data analytics firm in downtown Phoenix, his dedication hadn't gone unnoticed. For 3 years, he'd built relationships with clients that went beyond simple vendor-customer dynamics. He knew Jennifer Morrison from Pacific Insurance preferred her reports delivered on Tuesday mornings, with a brief phone summary. He understood that David Chen, at Southwest Manufacturing, needed his quarterly analysis broken down into executive-friendly visuals. These weren't just professional courtesies, they were the foundation of a trust that generated millions in revenue. The morning of Friday, October 13th, started like any other. Marcus pulled into the parking garage at 6:45 a.m., his usual time, grabbing his coffee from the security guard's desk where Felipe always left an extra cup for the early arrivals. The Phoenix sunrise painted the office building in warm oranges and pinks as Marcus settled into his corner workstation on the 15th floor. His computer screen displayed a calendar packed with client calls, 3 proposal deadlines, and a team meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. Marcus had spent the previous evening fine-tuning a presentation for Pinnacle Healthcare, a potential client worth $2.3 million annually. The proposal represented months of research, custom algorithm development, and strategic positioning that could transform their quarterly number. The first indication something was wrong came at 9:15 a.m. Rebecca Sullivan, the VP of Client Relations, walked past his desk without her usual morning greeting. Marcus noticed but dismissed it as stress related to the upcoming board meeting. Rebecca had been tense all week, fielding calls from executives and managing what she called corporate restructuring discussions. At 10:30 a.m., Marcus received an email from IT requesting he attend a routine security briefing in Conference Room B at 1. The timing struck him as odd, since it conflicted with his team meeting. But mandatory security updates weren't uncommon in their industry. DataSync handled sensitive financial data for dozens of corporations, making cybersecurity protocols a constant priority. Marcus spent the morning making client calls, his usual Friday routine of checking in with key accounts and addressing any weekend concerns. His conversation with Patricia Vance at Desert Financial went particularly well. She mentioned expanding their data analytics package for the upcoming fiscal year, potentially doubling their contract value. Marcus made detailed notes about her requirements, already formulating solutions that could cement DataSync's position as their primary analytics partner. At 12:45 p.m., Marcus saved his work, locked his computer, and headed to Conference Room B. The room was smaller than usual meeting spaces, equipped with a single table and 4 chairs. Rebecca Sullivan sat at the far end, flanked by 2 people. Marcus didn't recognize a middle-aged woman in a severe black suit and a younger man with a briefcase. "Marcus, please have a seat," Rebecca said, her voice lacking its usual warmth. "I'd like you to meet Sarah Chen from Human Resources and Michael Torres from Legal." The introductions carried an ominous weight. Marcus had never met anyone from the corporate HR department, which operated from their headquarters in Denver. Legal representation at what was supposed to be a security briefing triggered immediate alarm bells. Sarah Chen opened a manila folder and placed a single sheet of paper on the table. "Ms. Caldwell, due to restructuring initiatives and performance optimization strategies, your position has been eliminated effective immediately. This document outlines your severance package and the terms of your departure." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. 3 years of exemplary performance reviews, client testimonials, and revenue generation meant nothing in the face of corporate cost-cutting. His mind raced through recent projects, searching for any indication this was coming. The Pinnacle Healthcare proposal, the Desert Financial expansion, the Morrison insurance renewal he'd secured just last month. I don't understand, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his head. My performance metrics are above target. I've brought in over $4 million in new business this year alone. Michael Torres, the lawyer, leaned forward. The decision is final, Mr. Caldwell. We're not here to debate performance. We're here to facilitate a smooth transition. Rebecca avoided eye contact as she spoke. Marcus, you've been a valuable team member. This decision reflects market conditions and strategic pivoting, not your individual contributions. The severance package is generous considering the circumstances. Marcus scanned the document. 2 weeks' pay. Immediate termination of health benefit. A non-compete clause preventing him from working in data analytics within a 50-mile radius for 18 months. The restrictions were harsh enough to effectively blacklist him from his chosen profession in the Phoenix market. 18 months non-compete for a termination without cause. Marcus asked, "That's excessive by any standard." Sarah Chen's expression remained neutral. Company policy for positions with access to sensitive client information and proprietary methodologies. It's designed to protect our intellectual property and client relationships. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. They were eliminating his position while simultaneously acknowledging his access to the company's most valuable assets. His relationships with clients, understanding of their systems, and knowledge of DataSync's analytical processes made him both valuable and dangerous. I need to gather my personal items, Marcus said, standing from the table. That won't be necessary, Michael Torres replied. Security will box your belongings and deliver them to your home address by the end of business today. We need you to surrender your access badge, company credit card, and any devices immediately. The escort to his desk felt surreal. Marcus had imagined many ways his career at DataSync might end: promotion to a bigger role, resignation for a better opportunity, even retirement decades in the future. He'd never envisioned being marched through the office like a terminated security risk, while colleagues pretended not to notice. His workstation looked exactly as he'd left it 2 hours earlier. Coffee cup half empty, client files organized in neat stacks. The Pinnacle Healthcare proposal is still open on his secondary monitor. 3 years of professional life reduced to a cardboard box that a security guard was hastily filling with personal photos and desk accessories. Your computer access has been revoked, the security guard said, not unkindly. It will handle transferring any work files to your replacement. Marcus watched as his professional identity was systematically dismantled. The family photo from his daughter's graduation, the small cactus plant his wife had given him for his first, the industry awards he'd earned for client satisfaction and revenue performance, all of it reduced to items in a box carried out under supervision. The elevator ride to the parking garage was silent. Marcus's mind churned through the implications of his termination. 18 months without income in his field. Health insurance lapses, the mortgage payments depended on his DataSync salary, his daughter's college tuition for the spring semester. But underneath the financial anxiety, something else was brewing. Anger at the corporate machinery that could discard 3 years of loyalty without warning. Frustration at being treated like a security threat, despite his spotless record. And a growing realization that DataSync had made a critical error in how they'd handled his departure. Marcus knew things they probably hoped he'd forgotten. He understood client relationships they'd assumed were transferable. He possessed insights into their operational vulnerabilities that could prove valuable to competitors. Most importantly, he had detailed knowledge of every client's specific needs, preferences, and contract renewal dates. As he drove out of the DataSync parking garage for the last time, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from Patricia Vance at Desert Financial. Looking forward to our Monday meeting about the expanded analytics package. This could be exactly what we need for Q. Marcus stared at the message. Patricia didn't know he'd been terminated. Neither did Jennifer Morrison, at Pacific Insurance, or David Chen, at Southwest Manufacturing, or any of the dozens of clients who trusted him personally rather than DataSync as a company. They expected him to be available Monday morning, ready to continue projects and discussions that had been years in the making. The non-compete clause specifically prohibited him from working in data analytics within 50 miles of Phoenix, but it said nothing about clients who chose to work with him if he established operations outside that radius. It contained no restrictions on using industry knowledge he'd acquired before joining DataSync, and it certainly didn't prevent him from starting his own company, if he could do so without directly competing in their geographic market. Marcus pulled into his driveway and sat in his car, still processing the day's event. His wife's Honda was gone. She was picking up their daughter from soccer practice. The house felt empty as he entered through the garage, carrying the cardboard box that represented his career's remains. He set the box on the kitchen counter and opened his laptop. His personal email contained messages from clients sent to his DataSync address that had been automatically forwarded before IT cut off access. Normal Friday afternoon communications about weekend availability and Monday morning priority. These clients had no idea their primary contact had been eliminated. Marcus opened a new browser tab and began researching business incorporation procedures in Nevada. Las Vegas was exactly 51 miles from downtown Phoenix, safely outside the non-compete radius. Nevada offered favorable business tax structures and streamlined LLC formation processes. More importantly, it provided a legal foundation for what was beginning to form in his mind. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Rebecca Sullivan's direct line. "Marcus, I wanted to follow up on today's events," Rebecca said when he answered. "I know the termination came as a shock. I wanted you to know this wasn't personal. Budget constraints forced some difficult decisions." "I understand," Marcus replied, though understanding and accepting were different things entirely. "A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel." Now, back to where we left off. "The company appreciates your discretion regarding client relationships and proprietary information. The non-compete clause is standard protection, but we hope you'll honor the spirit of professional courtesy as well." Marcus heard the underlying message. They were concerned about client retention and competitive intelligence. Their harsh termination process had been designed to prevent exactly the scenario they were now worried about. "Of course," Marcus said, "I've always maintained professional standards." After ending the call, Marcus realized Rebecca's concern validated his growing plan. DataSync was vulnerable precisely because they'd underestimated the value of personal client relationships. They'd assumed their contracts and corporate infrastructure were sufficient to maintain business without considering the human element that actually drove client satisfaction. Marcus spent the weekend researching Nevada business law, analyzing his DataSync employment contract, and carefully reviewing every client relationship he'd built over 3 years. The non-compete clause contained several exploitable loopholes, particularly around geographic restrictions and the definition of direct competition. By Sunday evening, Marcus had identified a path forward that was legally sound and strategically devastating. He would establish Caldwell Analytics LLC in Las Vegas, offering data consulting services that technically didn't compete with DataSync's Phoenix-based operations. He would target clients outside the 50-mile restriction radius, building a foundation before approaching existing relationships. The plan required one critical component: DataSync's client database and analytical methodologies. Without that information, Marcus would be starting from zero, competing against his former employer with inferior resources. But with it, he could offer existing clients superior service at competitive prices, backed by insider knowledge of their specific needs and DataSync's operational limitations. Sunday night, at 11:47 p.m., Marcus's access badge still worked. Security protocols required a manual deactivation process that apparently hadn't been completed over the weekend. The building was empty except for the overnight cleaning crew, who recognized Marcus from his frequent late nights and paid no attention to his presence. Marcus went directly to his former workstation. His login credentials had been revoked, but he'd anticipated that the computer he'd been assigned 3 years earlier had a firmware vulnerability he'd discovered during a security audit, but never reported. It allowed temporary administrator access through a specific boot sequence that bypassed user authentication. Within minutes, Marcus had access to DataSync's internal network. The client database was stored on a central server with permissions tied to his old employee ID. His termination had been processed hastily, leaving temporary access to systems that should have been immediately restricted. Marcus inserted a USB drive and began copying files, client contact information, contract details, billing histories, and performance metrics. The company's proprietary analytical algorithms, developed over years of client work and worth millions in competitive advantage. Email archives containing 3 years of client communications, including confidential project discussions and strategic planning documents. The download took exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. By 11:52 p.m., Marcus was walking out of DataSync Solutions with everything he needed to compete against his former employer on equal terms. Monday morning would bring new possibilities and the beginning of a corporate warfare that DataSync had inadvertently triggered through their callous termination process. Marcus Caldwell was no longer their employee, but he was about to become their most dangerous competitor. Marcus woke up Monday morning at 5:30 a.m., 2 hours earlier than usual. The USB drive sat on his nightstand like a loaded weapon. His wife Sarah had left early for her nursing shift at Phoenix General, unaware that her husband was about to declare war on his former employer. The kitchen felt different as Marcus prepared coffee. Everything looked the same: the granite countertops Sarah had insisted on, the family photos clustered around the refrigerator, the stack of bills held down by a ceramic cactus paperweight. But Marcus knew this was the last morning he'd wake up as merely an unemployed data analyst. By evening, he'd either be the founder of a legitimate competitor or facing potential criminal charges. His laptop displayed the incorporation documents for Caldwell Analytics LLC, filed electronically with Nevada's Secretary of State at 6:15 a.m. The business registration cost $75 and took 12 minutes to process. Marcus now owned a legally recognized consulting firm headquartered at a Las Vegas mail forwarding service. The irony wasn't lost on him. DataSync had spent millions on infrastructure, staff, and corporate positioning, while Marcus had created a competing entity for less than $100. The USB drive contained 847 client files, 23 proprietary algorithms, and 156,000 emails spanning 3 years of corporate communication. Marcus had spent Sunday night organizing the data into actionable intelligence: client contracts with renewal dates, profit margins on existing accounts, detailed analyses of each company's operational challenges and growth opportunities. Most importantly, personal contact information for decision-makers who trusted Marcus more than they trusted DataSync. At 7:45 a.m., Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Morrison at Pacific Insurance. "Marcus, can you push our 9 a.m. call to 10? Board meeting ran long this morning." Jennifer expected Marcus to be available for their scheduled discussion about Pacific's quarterly analytics review. She had no idea he'd been terminated, that DataSync was probably scrambling to assign her account to another analyst, or that Marcus was now positioned to offer her services through his own company. Marcus replied, "No problem, Jennifer. Actually, I have some interesting developments to discuss during our call. You might want to block out extra time." The response was intentionally vague but loaded with implications. Marcus needed to gauge client reactions carefully. If Jennifer and others were receptive to his transition, he could build Caldwell Analytics around existing relationships. If they remained loyal to DataSync, he'd need alternative strategy. Marcus drove to a coffee shop in Scottsdale, safely outside Phoenix city limits, and set up his mobile office. The location was strategic, close enough to maintain local client relationships, but technically outside DataSync's primary market area. His laptop connected to the shop's Wi-Fi under a business account he'd established that morning. At 9:15 a.m., Marcus received a call from David Chen at Southwest Manufacturing. "Marcus, I've been trying to reach you at the DataSync number but keep getting transferred to some guy named Bradley. What's going on over there?" Bradley Hoffman was DataSync's junior analyst, competent but lacking the deep client relationship skills that Marcus had developed. The fact that David was already frustrated with the transition played perfectly into Marcus's emerging strategy. "David, there have been some organizational changes at DataSync," Marcus said carefully. "I wanted to discuss how that might affect your analytics needs going forward." "Organizational changes? Marcus, you've been handling our account for 2 years. I don't want to break in with some new person who doesn't understand our manufacturing processes." I completely understand your concern. What if I told you there might be alternatives that could actually improve your service level while reducing costs? The conversation that followed would later be cited in DataSync's lawsuit against Marcus as evidence of client poaching, but at the time it felt like a natural discussion between professionals who'd worked together successfully. David's frustration with DataSync's transition process opened the door for Marcus to present Caldwell Analytics as a solution rather than a competitor. "So you're starting your own firm?" David asked after Marcus explained his new venture. "I've established a consulting practice focused on mid-market manufacturers like Southwest, smaller client base, more personalized attention, competitive pricing structure. What about our existing contract with DataSync?" Marcus had anticipated this question. His analysis of David's contract revealed a 30-day termination clause for any reason, standard in professional services agreements. Your contract allows termination with proper notice. If you're interested in exploring alternatives, we could discuss transition timing that works for everyone. David's response was immediate. "Send me a proposal. If you can match DataSync services at a better price point, I'm interested." The call ended with Marcus agreeing to deliver a comprehensive proposal by Wednesday. He'd just secured his first potential client using insider knowledge of their exact requirements, budget constraints, and decision-making timeline. Jennifer Morrison's 10 a.m. call followed a similar pattern. Pacific Insurance had been considering expanding their analytics package, but DataSync's pricing for additional services had been prohibitively expensive. Jennifer's frustration with being transferred to unfamiliar staff members created an opening for Marcus to position Caldwell Analytics as a superior alternative. "Marcus, I've worked with you for 3 years. You understand our business better than anyone at DataSync. If you can provide the same quality of service independently, that might solve several problems." By noon, Marcus had fielded calls from 7 clients, each expressing varying degrees of dissatisfaction with DataSync's handling of the transition. The pattern was consistent. Clients valued personal relationships over corporate infrastructure. They trusted Marcus's expertise more than DataSync's brand recognition. Most importantly, they were open to alternatives if those alternatives could provide better service at competitive price. Marcus's phone rang again. The caller ID showed Rebecca Sullivan's direct line at DataSync. "Marcus, we need to talk," Rebecca said without preamble. "I've been getting calls from clients asking about your availability. What exactly are you telling me?" "I'm answering their questions professionally and honestly," Marcus replied. "Several clients have expressed concerns about service continuity. Are you actively soliciting our clients for your new business?" The question was legally significant. Client solicitation could potentially violate the non-compete clause, depending on how courts interpreted direct competition and geographic restrictions. Marcus chose his response carefully. "I'm responding to client inquiries about my professional status. If they're interested in alternative service providers, that's their business decision to make. Marcus, you signed a non-compete agreement. You can't just steal our clients and expect no consequence." "Rebecca, I'm operating a consulting firm in Nevada, outside the geographic restrictions of my DataSync agreement. If Phoenix-based clients choose to work with a Nevada consultant, that's not a violation of anything." The legal technicality was accurate but pushed ethical boundaries. Marcus was exploiting geographic loopholes while using confidential client information to compete directly with his former employer. The distinction between legal and ethical was becoming increasingly blurred. After ending the call with Rebecca, Marcus realized DataSync was mobilizing their legal resources. He needed to accelerate his client acquisition timeline before they could seek injunctive relief or other legal remedies. Marcus spent the afternoon crafting proposals for interested clients. Each proposal was customized using proprietary information from the USB drive. He knew exactly what services each client required, their budget limitations, and their decision-making process. More importantly, he understood DataSync's cost structure and profit margins, allowing him to underbid their prices while maintaining profitability. Pacific Insurance received a proposal 30% below DataSync's rates for expanded analytics service. Southwest Manufacturing got a comprehensive package that included services DataSync had quoted separately, bundled at a 25% discount. Desert Financial's proposal addressed specific requirements, Patricia Vance had mentioned confidentially during previous discussion. Each proposal demonstrated intimate knowledge of client operations, strategic objectives, and technical requirements. The level of detail and customization was impossible to achieve without insider access to confidential information. Marcus was essentially using DataSync's own client intelligence against them. At 3:30 p.m., Marcus received a call from Patricia Vance at Desert Financial. "Marcus, I got your proposal this morning. The pricing is exceptional, but I'm concerned about your capacity as a startup. Can you handle our volume requirements?" Marcus had prepared for this objection. "Patricia, Caldwell Analytics is designed specifically for clients like Desert Financial. Instead of managing dozens of accounts with varying priorities, I'm focusing on a select group of clients who value personalized attention. You'd be working directly with me, not junior analysts or account managers. What about continuity if something happens to you? DataSync has backup systems and redundant staffing. That's a fair concern. I'm partnering with independent contractors who have experience with your type of analysis. Plus, you'd own all the analytical models and datasets we develop, giving you more control than typical vendor relationships." The conversation continued for 20 minutes, with Patricia asking detailed questions about technical capabilities, pricing structure, and service guarantees. Marcus answered each concern using specific knowledge of Desert Financial's operations and strategic priorities. By the end of the call, Patricia had verbally committed to transitioning her account to Caldwell Analytics. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from his wife. "How's the job search going? Any promising leads?" Sarah still didn't know about Friday's termination or Marcus's weekend activities. He'd planned to tell her everything Sunday night, but the magnitude of what he was attempting felt too overwhelming to share. Now, with clients expressing serious interest and DataSync mobilizing legal opposition, the stakes had escalated beyond simple job searching. Marcus typed back, "Several opportunities developing. We'll talk tonight." The afternoon brought 2 more client commitments and 3 additional proposal requests. Word was spreading through Marcus's professional network that he'd left DataSync to start his own firm. Former colleagues were reaching out with congratulations and referral offers. Industry contacts who'd worked with Marcus over the years expressed interest in Caldwell Analytics services. By 5 p.m., Marcus had verbal commitments representing $3.2 million in annual revenue potential. If even half of those commitments converted to signed contracts, Caldwell Analytics would be profitable from day one. The irony was inescapable. DataSync's harsh termination process had inadvertently created their most effective competitor. Marcus drove home through Phoenix rush hour traffic, his mind racing through next steps. Legal incorporation was complete. Client acquisition was exceeding expectations. Technical infrastructure could be established quickly using cloud-based service. The primary remaining challenge was operational execution, delivering on promises made to clients who expected DataSync-level service quality. His phone rang as he pulled into his drive. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar: Denver, where DataSync's corporate headquarters operated. "Mr. Caldwell, this is attorney Michael Torres. We spoke Friday regarding your termination. I'm calling to inform you that DataSync Solutions is prepared to take legal action regarding your apparent violations of your employment agreement." Marcus had expected this call but hoped for more time to solidify client relationships before facing legal challenges. "Ms. Torres, I'm not aware of any agreement violations. Could you be more specific about your concerns?" "Mr. Caldwell, we have documentation of client solicitation activities that directly violate your non-compete clause. We're prepared to seek emergency injunctive relief if you don't cease these activities immediately. I'm operating a legitimate consulting business in Nevada, outside the geographic restrictions of my DataSync agreement. If you believe otherwise, I suggest you review the contract language more carefully." "Mr. Caldwell, using confidential client information to compete against DataSync is a clear violation regardless of geographic technicality. We have evidence of your unauthorized access to company systems over the weekend." Marcus felt his stomach drop. They knew about Sunday night's data theft. Security cameras, network logs, or digital forensics had revealed his infiltration. The legal situation had just escalated from contract disputes to potential criminal charges. Mr. Torres, I'm not sure what you're referring to. If you have specific allegations, I suggest you present them through proper legal channels. Mr. Caldwell, we're offering you one opportunity to resolve this situation amicably. Cease all client solicitation activities, return any confidential materials, and we'll limit our response to civil remedy. Continue down this path, and we'll pursue criminal charges for corporate espionage and data theft. The call ended with Marcus agreeing to consider their offer. He sat in his driveway, engine off, contemplating the magnitude of what he'd set in motion. Less than 72 hours ago, he'd been a loyal employee with a stable career. Now he was facing potential criminal prosecution while simultaneously building a business that could generate millions in revenue. Marcus looked at his house, the mortgage payments that depended on steady income, the family photos visible through the front window, the life he'd built over years of conventional career advancement. Everything was at risk now, but everything was also possible in ways that would never have existed as a DataSync employee. His phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Morrison. Marcus, got your proposal. Very impressive. Can we meet tomorrow to discuss transition logistics? I think the Pacific is ready to make this move. Marcus stared at the message. Jennifer represented $800,000 in annual revenue, and one of the most prestigious client relationships in his portfolio. Her commitment to Caldwell Analytics would validate his business model while delivering a devastating blow to DataSync's client base. But accepting Jennifer's business now meant crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. DataSync's legal threats would become reality. The safe path was to retreat, apologize, and hope for lenient treatment. The dangerous path was to accelerate client acquisition. Before legal action could stop him, Marcus typed his response. Jennifer, I'd be delighted to meet tomorrow. Let's discuss how Caldwell Analytics can exceed your expectations while providing better value than your current provider. He pressed send and walked into his house. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Their daughter Emily was at the dining room table working on homework, and the television was playing evening news in the background. Normal family life continued while Marcus navigated the biggest risk of his professional career. How was your day? Sarah asked, not looking up from the stove. Marcus considered his response. In 12 hours he'd established a business, solicited clients using stolen data, received legal threats from his former employer, and committed to a path that could lead to either tremendous success or criminal prosecution. Productive, he said. Very productive. Tuesday morning arrived with an FBI agent standing on Marcus Caldwell's front doorstep at 6:47 a.m. Special Agent Lisa Martinez displayed her credentials through the peephole, her expression neutral but determined. Behind her a black SUV idled in the driveway with tinted windows that suggested additional personnel. Mr. Caldwell, I need to speak with you regarding a federal investigation into alleged computer crimes and corporate espionage, Agent Martinez said when Marcus opened the door. This conversation can happen here or at our field office, your choice. Marcus's wife Sarah emerged from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, her nursing scrubs indicating she was preparing for her morning shift. Marcus, what's going on? She asked, taking in the FBI presence with growing alarm. Agent Martinez, I'd prefer to handle this through my attorney, Marcus replied, though he hadn't actually retained legal counsel yet. Could you provide me with your contact information, so we can arrange proper representation? Mr. Caldwell, I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to give you an opportunity to cooperate before this investigation escalates. DataSync Solutions filed a complaint yesterday afternoon, alleging theft of trade secrets, unauthorized computer access, and violation of the Economic Espionage Act. These are federal crimes with serious consequences. The Economic Espionage Act carried penalties up to 15 years in federal prison. Marcus felt the weight of his Sunday night decision settling on his shoulders like concrete. What had seemed like justifiable retaliation against an unfair termination was now being characterized as federal criminal activity. Sarah set down her coffee mug with trembling hands. Marcus, what is she talking about? What trade secrets? What computer access? Marcus realized his wife was learning about his termination and subsequent activities simultaneously. The careful revelation he'd planned was being replaced by federal criminal allegations delivered by law enforcement. Sarah, I was terminated from DataSync last Friday. I didn't want to worry you until I had a plan figured out, Marcus said, aware that Agent Martinez was listening to every word. There appear to be some misunderstandings about my business activities since then. Agent Martinez consulted a tablet device. Mr. Caldwell, our digital forensics team has preliminary evidence of unauthorized network access at DataSync Solutions Sunday evening. Security footage shows someone matching your description entering the building, using credentials that should have been deactivated. Do you want to explain? The question was a trap. Admitting to Sunday night's activities would provide evidence for federal prosecution. Denying them would constitute lying to a federal agent, itself a felony. Marcus chose silence, which Agent Martinez interpreted correctly. Ms. Caldwell, I'm going to be direct with you. DataSync's complaint includes documentation of client solicitation, using confidential information obtained through unauthorized access. They have email records, phone call logs, and copies of proposals containing proprietary data. This isn't a civil dispute anymore. This is a federal criminal investigation. Sarah looked at Marcus with confusion and growing anger. You stole information from your old company. Marcus, what were you thinking? I didn't steal anything, Marcus said, though the statement felt hollow even to him. I accessed systems using legitimate credentials to retrieve work I'd contributed to over 3 years of employment. Agent Martinez shook her head. Ms. Caldwell, your employment was terminated Friday afternoon. Any access after that point was unauthorized regardless of credential validity. The Economic Espionage Act specifically addresses theft of trade secrets for commercial advantage, which appears to describe your activities exactly. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from Jennifer Morrison at Pacific Insurance. Marcus, I'm getting calls from DataSync's legal department about our proposed transition. They're claiming you violated non-compete agreements. Can you clarify the situation? The timing was catastrophic. Agent Martinez noticed Marcus reading the message, her expression suggesting she understood its implications for the federal case. Mr. Caldwell, I strongly recommend you retain qualified legal counsel immediately. This investigation is proceeding whether you cooperate or not. The question is whether you want to be part of the solution, or face maximum penalties as an uncooperative defendant. After Agent Martinez left, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. Marcus, I can't believe you didn't tell me you were fired. I can't believe you broke into your old company. I can't believe the FBI is at our house talking about federal prison. Marcus attempted to explain his reasoning, but each justification sounded weaker in the context of criminal charges. His anger at DataSync's termination process, his belief that client relationships belonged to him personally rather than the company, his conviction that he was merely leveraging his own professional knowledge and experience. Sarah, I built those client relationships over 3 years. DataSync fired me without cause, then expected me to just disappear while they profited from work I'd done. I wasn't going to let them destroy my career without consequences. So you decided to destroy our family instead? Sarah asked, her voice rising. Marcus, if you go to federal prison, we lose everything: the house, Emily's college fund, my ability to trust anything you tell me. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone ringing. The caller ID showed David Chen from Southwest Manufacturing. Marcus, I need to understand what's happening, David said when Marcus answered. DataSync's attorney called this morning, claiming you stole confidential information to compete against them. They're threatening legal action against any company that works with you. Marcus realized DataSync was implementing a scorched earth strategy, rather than simply pursuing legal remedies against him. They were warning his potential clients about criminal investigations and legal risks. The approach was designed to isolate Marcus professionally while building their federal case. David, there are some legal disagreements about my departure from DataSync. I can't discuss specifics, but I want you to know that Caldwell Analytics remains committed to providing excellent service, regardless of external complications. Marcus, I like working with you, but Southwest Manufacturing can't afford to get involved in corporate espionage allegations. We're going to have to postpone any transition discussions until these issues are resolved. The call ended with Marcus losing his first major client prospect. Within an hour, similar calls came from 3 other potential clients.
DataSync's legal strategy was effectively neutralizing Caldwell Analytics before it could establish operational momentum. Marcus drove to a law office in Tempe, recommended by a colleague who'd faced employment dispute. Attorney Rachel Kim specialized in white-collar criminal defense and had experience with Economic Espionage Act cases. Her initial consultation was sobering. "Marcus, the federal charges you're facing are extremely serious," Attorney Kim explained after reviewing the basic facts.
The Economic Espionage Act was designed to prosecute corporate espionage and trade secret theft. Unauthorized computer access adds additional federal charges under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. You're potentially looking at decades in federal prison. Rachel, I didn't spy for foreign governments or sell secrets to competitors. I used my professional knowledge to start a legitimate consulting business. Marcus, the Economic Espionage Act covers domestic trade secret theft for commercial advantage, not just foreign espionage. Using proprietary algorithms and client databases to compete against your former employer fits the statutory definition exactly. Attorney Kim outlined potential defense strategies, but each approach had significant limitations. Claiming the information wasn't actually confidential would require proving DataSync didn't adequately protect it. Difficult given their security protocols. Arguing that Marcus had legitimate access would fail because his employment had been terminated. Challenging the value of stolen information would still admit to the underlying conduct. Rachel, what are my realistic options here? Marcus, honestly, your best option is probably cooperation with federal prosecutors. If you provide complete information about your activities, return all confidential materials and testify against anyone else involved, you might negotiate reduced charges or probation instead of prison time. Anyone else involved? Rachel, I acted alone. There's nobody else to testify against. Marcus, federal prosecutors will want to understand how you accessed DataSync systems, whether you had inside help, if you've shared confidential information with others, and if there are additional victims beyond DataSync. Cooperation means answering all those questions completely and honestly. Marcus left the law office understanding that his situation was worse than he'd realized. Federal prosecutors had broad discretion in pursuing Economic Espionage Act cases. Even if he cooperated fully, prison time remained likely given the severity of the charges and the commercial value of stolen information. His phone rang as he sat in the parking lot. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar when he answered. Marcus, this is Rebecca Sullivan from DataSync. I'm calling to make you a final offer before this situation becomes irreversible. Marcus activated his phone's recording function, a decision that would later prove crucial. Rebecca, my attorney has advised me not to discuss this matter directly with DataSync representatives. Marcus, forget the attorneys for a moment. We've worked together for 3 years. I don't want to see you go to federal prison over a misunderstanding that can still be resolved. Rebecca, what kind of resolution are you suggesting? Marcus, here's what DataSync is prepared to offer. You return all confidential materials, cease all client solicitation activities, dissolve Caldwell Analytics, and sign an expanded non-disclosure agreement. In exchange, we'll withdraw our federal complaint and limit our response to civil remedies. The offer was significant. Withdrawing the federal complaint would eliminate Marcus's criminal exposure, though civil lawsuits would still be possible. But accepting the offer would also end any possibility of competing against DataSync or maintaining the client relationships he'd built. Rebecca, what happens to the clients who've already expressed interest in working with Caldwell Analytics? Marcus, those clients will return to DataSync or find alternative providers. You won't be permitted to service them directly or indirectly. The expanded non-disclosure agreement would prevent you from using any DataSync-related knowledge in future employment. Marcus realized the offer was designed to eliminate him as a competitive threat, while avoiding the uncertainty of federal prosecution. DataSync wanted to neutralize his ability to compete without the public attention that criminal trials would generate. Rebecca, I need time to consider this with my attorney. Marcus, this offer expires at close of business today. After that, DataSync will pursue maximum penalties through both criminal and civil proceedings. We're talking about federal prison, personal bankruptcy, and permanent destruction of your professional reputation. The call ended with Marcus facing an impossible choice. Accepting DataSync's offer would preserve his freedom, but destroy his career and potentially leave his family financially devastated. Rejecting it would mean facing federal criminal charges with uncertain outcomes and enormous legal costs. Marcus drove home through Phoenix afternoon traffic, his mind churning through implications and alternatives. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from former clients, business contacts and industry colleagues who'd heard about the federal investigation. Word was spreading through Phoenix's business community that Marcus Caldwell was under criminal investigation for corporate espionage. At a red light, Marcus's phone displayed a text message from Patricia Vance at Desert Financial. Marcus, just heard about your legal trouble. Desert Financial is terminating all discussions with Caldwell Analytics effective immediately. Our legal department prohibits working with vendors under federal investigation. Another client relationship destroyed by DataSync's strategic response. Marcus was beginning to understand that his former employer's legal strategy was more sophisticated than simple criminal complaints. They were systematically destroying his professional reputation while pressuring him to accept their settlement term. Marcus arrived home to find his wife packing suitcases in their bedroom. Emily was at soccer practice, unaware that her family was disintegrating around her. Sarah, what are you doing? Marcus, I'm taking Emily to my mother's house until this situation gets resolved. I can't have my daughter living in a house where federal agents might arrive with search warrants or arrest warrants. Sarah, that's not necessary. My attorney thinks we can resolve this without criminal charges. Marcus, your attorney thinks you might go to federal prison for decades. I heard your phone calls today. I heard you losing clients and destroying your professional reputation. I can't pretend this is just a temporary setback. Sarah's decision to leave felt like the final consequence of Marcus's Sunday night decision. He'd risked everything to compete against DataSync, and everything was being systematically destroyed in response. Marcus sat in his empty house that evening, surrounded by the silence that follows family departure. His laptop displayed emails from clients canceling meetings, business contacts distancing themselves from criminal investigations, and professional organizations suspending his memberships, pending legal resolution. At 8:30 p.m., his phone rang. The caller ID showed attorney Rachel Kim's office number. Marcus, I've been contacted by federal prosecutors regarding your case. They're interested in discussing cooperation agreements, but they want to meet tomorrow morning. This suggests they're serious about moving forward quickly. Rachel, what kind of cooperation are they expecting? Marcus, they want complete disclosure of all activities since your DataSync termination, return of all confidential materials, testimony about potential co-conspirators, and cooperation in ongoing investigations of corporate espionage activities. Rachel, I told you before I acted alone. There are no co-conspirators. Marcus, federal prosecutors often use individual cases to investigate broader patterns. They might be interested in your knowledge of DataSync's security vulnerabilities, other employees with access to confidential information, or industry practices that facilitate trade secret theft. Marcus realized the federal investigation was potentially broader than his individual case. Prosecutors might be using his situation to understand corporate espionage risks across the data analytics industry. Rachel, what happens if I refuse to cooperate? Marcus, then you face trial on all charges with no prosecutorial consideration for cooperation. Given the evidence they appear to have, conviction is likely. You'd be facing maximum sentences under both the Economic Espionage Act and Computer Fraud and Abuse. Marcus hung up the phone and sat in his darkened living room, contemplating decisions that had seemed reasonable just days earlier. His plan to compete against DataSync using superior client knowledge had evolved into federal criminal charges that threatened to destroy everything he'd built over decades of professional life. But as Marcus sat in the silence, another realization began forming. DataSync's aggressive response suggested they were more vulnerable than he'd initially understood. Their willingness to involve federal prosecutors, threaten criminal charges, and systematically destroy his professional relationships indicated that his competitive threat had genuinely frightened them. Marcus opened his laptop and began researching Economic Espionage Act cases, looking for precedents and defense strategies that his attorney hadn't mentioned. If DataSync wanted to play hardball, he needed to understand the full scope of the game they were playing. The war was far from over. Marcus spent Wednesday morning in the FBI field office conference room, facing 3 federal prosecutors and 2 agents across a metal table that reflected the fluorescent lighting like a mirror. The room smelled of industrial disinfectant and stale coffee, designed to make subjects uncomfortable during lengthy interrogations. Assistant U.S. Attorney Catherine Reeves led the prosecution team, her reputation for aggressive corporate crime prosecutions preceding her into the room. She'd secured convictions against Fortune 500 executives for securities fraud, obtained guilty pleas from international hackers for cyber crimes, and built a career on high-profile cases that generated national media attention. Caldwell, we appreciate you coming in voluntarily. Attorney Reeves began, though Marcus understood his presence wasn't truly voluntary given the federal charges hanging over his head. We're prepared to discuss cooperation agreements, but first we need complete honesty about your activity. Attorney Rachel Kim sat beside Marcus, legal pads covered with notes from their preparation session that morning. She'd warned Marcus that federal prosecutors used cooperation meetings to gather additional evidence while appearing to offer leniency. Ms. Caldwell, let's start with your unauthorized access to DataSync's computer systems, Agent Martinez said, consulting a thick file folder. Our digital forensics team has documented your network activity Sunday evening. Walk us through exactly what you accessed and why. Marcus had rehearsed this moment with his attorney, but the reality felt more intimidating than practice sessions. Agent Martinez, I used my employee credentials to access work files that I'd contributed to during my employment. I didn't realize the access had been terminated. Ms. Caldwell, your employment ended Friday afternoon. You accessed the system Sunday night, approximately 60 hours later. Are you claiming you genuinely believed your access remained valid? The question exposed the weakness in Marcus's position. Reasonable people would understand that terminated employees lose system access immediately. Claiming otherwise suggested either dishonesty or profound naivety. Agent Martinez, DataSync's termination process was abrupt and poorly communicated. I wasn't explicitly told that system access had been revoked. Attorney Reeves leaned forward. Mr. Caldwell, let's discuss what you did with the information you obtained. Our investigation shows you used confidential client data to solicit business for your new company. How do you justify that conduct? Marcus felt the prosecutorial trap closing around him. Admitting to using confidential information would provide evidence for Economic Espionage Act charges. Denying it would contradict documented evidence of his client proposals containing proprietary data. Ms. Reeves, I used my professional knowledge and experience to offer consulting services to companies I'd worked with previously. The relationships were built over years of legitimate business interaction. Ms. Caldwell, your proposals contained specific financial information, technical specifications and strategic details that weren't publicly available. Where did that information come from, if not DataSync's confidential file? The interrogation continued for 3 hours, with prosecutors methodically documenting Marcus's activities while building their federal case. Each question was designed to elicit admissions that would support criminal charges while appearing to offer opportunities for cooperation. During a break, Attorney Kim pulled Marcus aside. Marcus, they have overwhelming evidence of computer access and information theft. Your best option is full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. Rachel, what kind of cooperation are they expecting? Marcus, they want you to provide detailed information about DataSync's security vulnerabilities, identify other employees with access to confidential systems, and testify about industry practices that facilitate corporate espionage. They're building a broader case. Marcus realized the federal investigation extended beyond his individual situation. Prosecutors were using his case to understand systematic vulnerabilities in corporate data protection across the technology industry. When the session resumed, Attorney Reeves presented a cooperation agreement draft. Mr. Caldwell, We're prepared to recommend reduced charges in exchange for complete cooperation. You'd plead guilty to 1 count of computer fraud, receive probation instead of prison time, and assist our ongoing investigation of corporate espionage activity. The agreement required Marcus to provide detailed technical information about DataSync's security systems, identify current and former employees with administrative access, and participate in ongoing federal investigations of similar cases. In exchange, prosecutors would drop Economic Espionage Act charges that carried potential life sentences. Miss Reeves, I need time to review this with my attorney, Marcus said, though the basic terms seemed reasonable compared to decades in federal prison. Miss Caldwell, this offer expires Friday at noon. After that, we proceed to grand jury indictment on all charges without any cooperation consideration. Marcus left the FBI office understanding that his legal options were narrowing rapidly. Accepting the cooperation agreement would avoid prison time, but require him to become an informant against his former employer and industry colleagues. Rejecting it would mean facing federal trial with minimal chance of acquittal. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Marcus, this is Jennifer Morrison. I'm using a personal phone because DataSync is monitoring my business communications. We need to talk privately about your situation. Jennifer's willingness to circumvent DataSync's surveillance suggested she remained interested in working with Marcus despite the federal investigation. Her message provided the first positive development in days of escalating legal pressure. Marcus drove to a coffee shop in Mesa, far from DataSync's Phoenix headquarters, where Jennifer was waiting in a corner booth with newspapers spread across the table like camouflage. She looked nervous but determined, glancing around the room before speaking. Marcus, I heard about the FBI investigation and DataSync's legal campaign against you. I wanted you to know that Pacific Insurance still values our working relationship regardless of external complications. The statement was carefully worded to avoid admitting knowledge of confidential information while expressing continued business interest. Jennifer understood the legal implications of being associated with Marcus's situation. Jennifer, I appreciate your confidence, but I can't expose Pacific Insurance to legal risks associated with my departure from DataSync. Marcus, let me be direct. DataSync's service quality has deteriorated significantly since your termination. The analyst they assigned to our account doesn't understand our business model, can't answer technical questions, and seems more interested in upselling additional services than solving our actual problem. Jennifer's frustration with DataSync's transition process created an opportunity, but Marcus understood that pursuing Pacific Insurance's business could violate his potential cooperation agreement with federal prosecutor. Jennifer, what specific problems are you experiencing with the new analyst? Marcus, Bradley Hoffman spent our Monday meeting trying to sell us analytics packages we don't need, instead of addressing the quarterly report discrepancies we've been discussing for weeks. He couldn't explain the methodology behind our risk assessments, and suggested we hire external consultants to handle complex calculations. The incompetence Jennifer described was exactly what Marcus had predicted. DataSync's assumption that client relationships were transferable ignored the technical expertise and institutional knowledge that individual analysts brought to each account. Jennifer, have you considered working with alternative analytics providers? Marcus, Pacific Insurance has invested 3 years in DataSync's systems and methodologies. Switching providers would require significant retraining and data migration. We'd prefer to work with someone who understands our existing infrastructure. The conversation continued for 45 minutes, with Jennifer outlining Pacific Insurance's specific requirements and timeline for resolving their analytics problem. She was essentially offering Marcus a $800,000 annual contract if he could provide services that DataSync was failing to deliver. Marcus left the coffee shop understanding that legitimate business opportunities existed despite his legal trouble. Client dissatisfaction with DataSync's service quality was creating market demand for alternatives, particularly from providers who understood existing systems and relationships. But pursuing those opportunities while facing federal charges would violate every aspect of his potential cooperation agreement. Marcus was trapped between business success and legal survival, unable to pursue both simultaneously. His phone rang as he drove home,
The caller ID showed his wife's number. "Marcus, I've been thinking about our situation," Sarah said, her voice strained but more controlled than their previous conversations. "I want to understand what you're planning to do about the federal charges." "Sarah, my attorney thinks the cooperation agreement is our best option. I'd avoid prison time but have to help federal prosecutors with their broader investigation." "Marcus, what does that mean for our family? What does it mean for your career?" Marcus realized he hadn't fully considered the long-term implications of becoming a federal informant. Cooperation agreements often required ongoing assistance with investigations that could last years. His professional reputation would be permanently damaged by association with corporate espionage cases. "Sarah, honestly, I don't know. The cooperation agreement would resolve the immediate criminal charges, but it might end my career in data analytics permanently." "Marcus, maybe that's not entirely bad. Maybe this is an opportunity to start over in a different field, away from the corporate politics and ethical complications that led to this situation." Sarah's perspective surprised Mark. He'd assumed she wanted him to return to stable employment as quickly as possible. Her suggestion that career change might be beneficial indicated she'd been thinking more strategically about their family's future. "Sarah, what kind of career change are you suggesting?" "Marcus, you have advanced degrees in mathematics and computer science. You could teach at the university level, work for government agencies that value analytical skills, or start a legitimate consulting practice that doesn't depend on proprietary information." The conversation continued for an hour, with Sarah outlining potential career paths that would allow Marcus to use his technical skills without competing directly against former employers. Teaching appealed to him, though academic salaries were significantly lower than corporate analytics positions. That evening, Marcus researched university employment opportunities in the Phoenix area. Arizona State University had openings for adjunct instructors in their mathematics and computer science departments. The positions offered modest compensation but provided legitimate alternatives to corporate employment. Marcus also investigated government employment opportunities. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, Census Bureau, and various federal agencies employed statisticians and data analysts for legitimate research purposes. Government positions offered job security and ethical clarity that corporate work often lacked. His laptop displayed the cooperation agreement that Attorney Reeves had provided. The document was 37 pages of legal language that essentially required Marcus to become a professional informant against the data analytics industry. He would assist federal investigations, provide expert testimony in corporate espionage cases, and help prosecutors understand technical vulnerabilities in corporate data protection. The compensation for cooperation was freedom rather than financial reward. Marcus would avoid federal prison but sacrifice his professional reputation and future earning potential in his chosen field. At 10:30 p.m., Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Rebecca Sullivan's direct line at DataSync. "Marcus, I'm calling to inform you that DataSync is prepared to modify our settlement offer based on recent developments," Rebecca said, her voice suggesting she knew about the federal cooperation discussion. "Rebecca, my attorney has advised me not to discuss settlement terms directly with DataSync representatives." "Marcus, forget the attorneys for a moment. I'm calling because DataSync's board of directors has concerns about the federal investigation scope. They're worried that prosecutorial attention might reveal business practices they'd prefer to keep confidential." The admission was significant. DataSync was concerned that a federal investigation of Marcus's case might expose their own questionable practices. Corporate executives often used aggressive legal tactics until government scrutiny threatened to reveal their own vulnerabilities. "Rebecca, what kind of business practices are concerning your board?" "Marcus, let's just say that DataSync's client acquisition methods and competitive intelligence gathering might not withstand federal examination. Your case has attracted attention that makes everyone nervous." Marcus realized DataSync's aggressive prosecution strategy had backfired. Federal investigators were examining their security protocols, employment practices, and competitive strategies as part of the broader corporate espionage investigation. DataSync now faced the same government scrutiny they'd used to pressure Rebecca, what kind of modified settlement are you proposing?" "Marcus, DataSync is prepared to withdraw all criminal complaints, provide positive employment references, and offer a financial settlement in exchange for mutual non-disclosure agreement. Everyone walks away quietly without federal attention." The offer represented a complete reversal of DataSync's previous position. Instead of demanding Marcus's destruction, they were now offering compensation to make the federal investigation disappear. Rebecca, what about the client relationships I've built and the business opportunities I've identified? Marcus, under the modified settlement, you'd be free to pursue any business opportunities that don't directly use DataSync's proprietary information. We're no longer seeking to enforce the non-compete agreement. The conversation ended with Rebecca agreeing to provide written settlement terms by Thursday morning. Marcus hung up, understanding that the power dynamic had shifted dramatically. DataSync's fear of federal scrutiny was creating leverage he hadn't expected. Marcus spent Wednesday night weighing three alternatives: accepting DataSync's financial settlement, cooperating with federal prosecutors, or fighting the charges through trial. Each option carried significant risks and uncertain outcomes. The settlement would provide immediate financial relief and end the legal pressure, but might leave him vulnerable to future prosecution if additional evidence emerged. Federal cooperation would guarantee avoiding prison time but require years of involvement in government investigations. Trial would preserve his autonomy but risk decades in federal prison if convicted. As Marcus sat in his empty house, he realized the decision would determine not just his legal fate, but the direction of his entire life. The choices he made in the next 24 hours would echo through decades of consequences for himself, his family, and everyone connected to the expanding federal investigation. His phone buzzed with a text message from Jennifer Morrison. Marcus, Pacific Insurance Board meeting tomorrow morning. They're voting on whether to terminate the DataSync contract due to service quality issues. Your alternative might be more relevant than ever. Marcus stared at the message, understanding that legitimate business opportunities were emerging just as legal pressures were reaching their peak. The timing was perfect and terrible simultaneously. Success was possible precisely when pursuing it carried maximum legal risk. Tomorrow would bring decisions that would reshape everything.
Thursday morning arrived with Marcus sitting in attorney Rachel Kim's office, 3 different legal documents spread across her desk like strategic battle plans. The federal cooperation agreement demanded his signature by noon. DataSync's revised settlement offer required response by close of business. A grand jury indictment threatened automatic filing if he chose neither option. Marcus, I've never seen a federal case shift this dramatically in 72 hours. Attorney Kim said, reviewing DataSync's latest settlement terms. Yesterday they wanted to destroy you. Today they're offering $2.3 million to make this disappear quietly. The financial settlement represented 3 years of Marcus's DataSync salary, health insurance continuation for his family, positive employment references, and most importantly, complete withdrawal of all criminal complaints. DataSync's desperation to end federal scrutiny had transformed them from adversary to supplicant. Rachel, what's driving DataSync's sudden generosity? Marcus, federal prosecutors contacted DataSync's attorneys Wednesday afternoon with a list of additional investigative targets. Your case opened doors they probably wish had remained closed. Attorney Kim displayed her tablet showing news articles about the expanding federal investigation. DataSync Solutions was now listed among dozens of technology companies under scrutiny for systematic corporate intelligence gathering practices and inadequate protection of trade secrets. The Economic Espionage Act investigation had evolved beyond individual prosecutions to industry-wide examination of competitive practices. Rachel, what happens if I accept DataSync's settlement? Marcus, you walk away with significant financial compensation and no criminal record, but you'd also forfeit any claims to the client relationships you've built and agree to permanent non-disclosure about DataSync's business practices. And if I cooperate with federal prosecutors? Marcus, you'd avoid prison time, but spend years helping prosecute other industry professionals. Your reputation would be permanently damaged by association with federal informant activities. Plus, there's no guarantee prosecutors won't pursue additional charges if they discover evidence you haven't disclosed. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Morrison. Marcus, Pacific Insurance voted unanimously to terminate the DataSync contract effective immediately. Board authorized me to negotiate with an alternative analytics provider. Are you available? The timing was extraordinary. Pacific Insurance's decision created an $800,000 annual business opportunity, precisely when Marcus faced the most critical decision of his professional life. Accepting either legal agreement would prevent him from pursuing the contract direct. Rachel, is there a third option we haven't considered? Marcus, technically you could reject both agreements and fight the federal charges through trial, but conviction is virtually certain given the evidence, and sentences for Economic Espionage Act violations are severe. Marcus stood and walked to the office window overlooking downtown Phoenix. The DataSync building was visible in the distance, its glass facade reflecting morning sunlight like a beacon of corporate prosperity. Somewhere in that building, executives were desperately trying to contain a federal investigation that threatened to expose decades of questionable competitive practices. Rachel, what if I could prove that DataSync's own conduct was worse than anything I've done? Marcus, that's a dangerous strategy. Prosecutors don't appreciate defendants who try to deflect blame onto other parties. It usually backfires and results in harsher sentences. But Marcus was remembering details from his 3 years at DataSync that had seemed routine at the time but might appear different under federal scrutiny. The company's client acquisition methods often involved hiring employees from competitors specifically to gain access to their former employer's client information. DataSync's competitive intelligence department maintained extensive files on rival companies' employees, strategies, and vulnerability. Most significantly, Marcus recalled signing an employment agreement that explicitly required him to provide competitive intelligence about his previous employer when he joined DataSync from Phoenix Analytics 3 years earlier. The company's standard practice was systematically extracting confidential information from new hires about their former employer's operations. Rachel, what if DataSync has been doing systematically what they're accusing me of doing individually? Marcus spent the next hour outlining DataSync's competitive intelligence practices for attorney Kim. The company maintained a dedicated department for gathering information about competitors through employee recruitment, client communications monitoring, and strategic analysis of rival firms' capability. New employees were routinely debriefed about their former employer's client relationships, technical capabilities, and strategic vulnerabilities. Marcus, if you can document DataSync's systematic competitive intelligence gathering, it might provide leverage for negotiation. But it also escalates the conflict significantly. Attorney Kim's phone rang. The caller ID showed Assistant U.S. Attorney Catherine Reeves's office. Kim, I'm calling to inform you that we've discovered additional evidence in the DataSync investigation, Attorney Reeves said when Kim answered on speakerphone. We'd like to meet with your client immediately to discuss expanded cooperation opportunity. Reeves, what kind of additional evidence are you referring to? Ms. Kim, our forensic analysis of DataSync's computer systems has revealed a pattern of unauthorized access to competitor information that extends far beyond your client's individual case. We believe DataSync has been systematically violating the Economic Espionage Act for years. The revelation transformed Marcus's situation completely. Instead of being DataSync's primary target, he was now a potential witness against a much larger criminal enterprise. Federal prosecutors were no longer interested in prosecuting Marcus as much as they needed his cooperation to build cases against DataSync's executives. Ms. Reeves, what kind of expanded cooperation are you seeking? Kim, we want your client to provide detailed information about DataSync's competitive intelligence operations, identify key personnel involved in systematic trade secret theft, and assist our investigation of industry-wide corporate espionage activity. Marcus realized that accepting expanded cooperation would make him a central figure in prosecuting his former employer for crimes that dwarfed his individual violation. The irony was overwhelming. DataSync's aggressive pursuit of his case had triggered federal investigation of their own far more serious criminal activities. Ms. Reeves, we need time to consider this request with our client. Kim, we're prepared to offer complete immunity from prosecution in exchange for full cooperation. Your client would face no criminal charges and receive federal protection if needed. After ending the call, Marcus and Attorney Kim sat in stunned silence. Complete immunity meant Marcus could pursue any business opportunities without legal restriction, while helping federal prosecutors dismantle the company that had terminated him so callously. Rachel, what are the implications of complete federal immunity? Marcus, It means you can't be prosecuted for any crimes related to this investigation, regardless of what evidence emerges. You'd be completely protected while helping prosecute DataSync's executives. Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Rebecca Sullivan's direct line. "Marcus, we need to meet immediately," Rebecca said, her voice strained with panic. "DataSync's board has authorized me to negotiate any settlement terms necessary to resolve this situation. Rebecca, my attorney, has advised me to limit direct communications with DataSync representatives." "Marcus, forget the attorneys. I'm calling because federal agents raided our offices this morning with search warrants for our competitive intelligence department. They've seized computers, files, and communications dating back 5 years. The board is terrified." The federal raid confirmed what Attorney Reeves had implied. DataSync was now the primary target of criminal investigation, with Marcus serving as a crucial witness rather than defendant. The power dynamic had reversed completely. "Rebecca, what kind of settlement terms is your board considering?" "Marcus, they've authorized me to offer you $5 million, complete release from all legal obligations, positive employment references, and a consulting contract for any business you choose to pursue. They just want this investigation to end." The offer was staggering. DataSync was prepared to pay Marcus more than a decade of salary to prevent him from cooperating with federal prosecutors. Their desperation indicated that executive-level criminal exposure was far worse than Marcus had realized. "Rebecca, I need to discuss this with my attorney." "Marcus, the board meets at 2 p.m. to decide whether to accept federal cooperation agreements themselves. If they flip first, any settlement offers disappear permanently." Marcus hung up, understanding that DataSync's executives were facing the same cooperation pressures he'd experienced, but with far greater criminal exposure. Their systematic corporate espionage activities had created liability that could result in decades of federal prison time for senior managers. Attorney Kim's phone buzzed with an urgent message from the federal prosecutor's office. "Federal agents have arrested DataSync CEO Thomas Morrison and CFO Patricia Gonzalez on Economic Espionage Act charges. Additional arrests expected today." The arrests meant DataSync's leadership was facing the same federal charges that had threatened Marcus just days earlier. The company's aggressive legal strategy had triggered investigation of their own criminal enterprise, resulting in executive-level prosecution. "Rachel, what happens to DataSync's settlement offer if their executives are in federal custody?" "Marcus, corporate settlements become meaningless if the company faces federal criminal charges. The board might not have authority to negotiate if key executives are facing prosecution." Marcus realized the window for financial settlement was closing rapidly. DataSync's offer of $5 million required a decision before their executives lost negotiating authority through criminal indictment. But accepting their settlement would mean forgoing federal immunity and the opportunity to legitimately compete against a criminally compromised opponent. Marcus could either take immediate financial compensation or position himself to capture DataSync's entire market share as they collapsed under federal prosecution. His phone rang. Jennifer Morrison's voice was excited when he answered. "Marcus, I just heard about the federal arrests at DataSync. Pacific Insurance's board has authorized me to offer you an exclusive analytics contract worth $1.2 million annually. We want to secure services before this situation deteriorates further." Jennifer's offer represented the beginning of what could become a substantial business empire built on DataSync's client base. As their federal prosecution proceeded, other clients would seek alternative providers. Marcus was positioned to capture market share worth tens of millions annually. "Jennifer, I'm very interested in discussing Pacific Insurance's requirements. When can we meet?" "Marcus, this afternoon if possible. The board wants contracts signed before DataSync's situation affects our operations." Marcus ended the call and looked at Attorney Kim. "Rachel, I think I know what decision to make." 2 hours later, Marcus sat in the FBI field office conference room, signing federal immunity agreements that protected him from all criminal prosecution, while requiring his cooperation in dismantling DataSync's corporate espionage operation. Assistant U.S. Attorney Catherine Reeves outlined the scope of federal investigation that now included 47 companies and over 200 individual targets. Mr. Caldwell, your information about DataSync's systematic competitive intelligence gathering has been crucial to understanding industry-wide trade secret theft. We expect this investigation to result in dozens of federal prosecutions. Marcus left the FBI office as a federally protected witness rather than criminal defendant. His cooperation would help prosecute the executives who'd terminated him while positioning him to capture their abandoned market share legally. That afternoon, Marcus met Jennifer Morrison at Pacific Insurance's headquarters, signing an exclusive analytics contract worth $1.2 million annually, with automatic renewal options. The agreement was the first of what would become a portfolio of contracts with former DataSync clients seeking reliable alternatives. By Friday evening, Marcus had received inquiries from 12 additional companies interested in analytics services. DataSync's federal prosecution had created market opportunities worth over $15 million annually for competitors who could provide equivalent services without criminal liability. Marcus drove home through Phoenix Sunset traffic, his phone displaying messages from potential clients, federal prosecutors coordinating his testimony schedule, and his wife asking when she and Emily could return home safely. The house felt different when Marcus unlocked the front door. The same furniture, the same family photos, the same kitchen where he'd planned his revenge against DataSync just 1 week earlier, but everything had changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. Marcus's laptop displayed incorporation documents for Caldwell Analytics LLC, now a legitimate consulting firm with federal immunity, substantial client contracts, and growth opportunities that exceeded his wildest projection. The USB drive that had triggered this entire sequence sat in his desk drawer, its contents now legally irrelevant thanks to federal protection. His phone rang. Sarah's voice was cautious but hopeful when he answered. "Marcus, I heard about the federal immunity agreement and the Pacific Insurance contract. Are we really safe now, Sarah?" "We're more than safe. We're positioned for success beyond anything I could have achieved at DataSync." "Marcus, what about your testimony obligation? How long will you need to cooperate with federal prosecutors?" "Sarah, probably 2 years of occasional testimony and document review, but immunity protects us permanently, and the business opportunities are extraordinary." Saturday morning brought news that DataSync Solutions had filed for bankruptcy protection, unable to operate effectively with key executives under federal indictment and their client base fleeing to competitor. The company that had terminated Marcus so callously was dissolving within 1 week of triggering the federal investigation. Marcus spent Saturday meeting with former DataSync clients interested in transition services. By Sunday he'd secured contracts worth $8.3 million annually, with additional opportunities developing as news of DataSync's collapse spread through the industry. On Monday morning, exactly 1 week after stealing DataSync's secrets in desperate revenge, Marcus sat in his new office space overlooking downtown Phoenix. Caldwell Analytics LLC occupied a modern suite with panoramic city views, employed 6 analysts recruited from DataSync's dissolving workforce, and maintained client relationships worth over $12 million annually. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from FBI agent Martinez. "Caldwell Federal Grand Jury has indicted 14 DataSync executives on Economic Espionage Act charges. Your testimony will be crucial to securing convictions. Thanks for your cooperation." The message represented complete vindication of Marcus's decision to fight rather than surrender. DataSync's attempt to destroy him had resulted in their own federal prosecution, while Marcus emerged with legitimate business success and federal protection. His laptop displayed an email from Bradley Hoffman, the junior analyst who'd replaced him at DataSync. "Marcus, I heard about your new company. DataSync terminated my employment Friday due to bankruptcy proceeding. Would you consider hiring former DataSync staff who weren't involved in the criminal activities?" Marcus smiled as he typed his response. "Bradley Caldwell Analytics is always interested in talented professionals seeking legitimate career opportunities. Let's discuss how your skills might contribute to our growing practice." The irony was perfect.
Marcus was now hiring the people who'd replaced him at DataSync, building his company with the talent his former employer was losing through federal prosecution. Marcus leaned back in his executive chair, looking out at the Phoenix skyline where DataSync's building stood empty, its executives facing decades in federal prison for crimes that made Marcus's violations seem trivial by comparison. 1 week earlier, Marcus Caldwell had been a terminated employee desperate for revenge. Today, he was the founder of Phoenix's fastest-growing analytics firm, protected by federal immunity and positioned to dominate a market his former employer had abandoned through their own criminal arrogance. The plan hadn't unfolded as Marcus had envisioned, but the results exceeded his most ambitious projections. Sometimes the best revenge is simply watching your enemies destroy themselves while you build something better from the wreckage they leave behind. Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar when he answered. "Mr. Caldwell, this is Thomas Morrison, former CEO of DataSync Solutions. I'm calling from federal detention to ask if you'd consider testifying on my behalf during sentencing hearing." Marcus couldn't suppress his laughter. "Thomas, I'll be testifying for the prosecution, not the defense, but I wish you the best of luck with your federal case." Marcus hung up and returned to reviewing contracts that would make him wealthier and more successful than he'd ever been as a DataSync employee. Justice, it turned out, was more profitable than revenge. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now, and hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest upload.